Hi, welcome to another week in Com 130. This week we are starting a brand new project, which is our magazine spread, and it is very exciting. I love this project. Today we're going to talk about the due dates for this week, requirements for the project, and we'll even take a look at some past student examples that I have had in my class. So first off, for your first due date this week, you have an InDesign worksheet, and for the second due date, you have a draft of the magazine spread due. And you'll notice from here on out in the class that we really get into a rhythm and a pattern. So essentially we'll have a week of precursor learning, which last week was type and photography. And then we'll have a draft week, which is this week for us. And then we'll have the final week for that given project. So hopefully that will give you a little bit of comfort moving forward. For the InDesign worksheet, it is similar to the Illustrator worksheet. InDesign is a program that is mostly used for publishing and page layout design, which makes it perfect for a project this week. And for most students, this is a completely new program for them. Like with the last worksheet, you're going to download the worksheet file, but this time you're going to open it up in the program Adobe InDesign. If you have not yet downloaded InDesign to your computer, you need to do that as soon as possible and before you start on that worksheet. There are videos, just like with our Illustrator worksheet, that you will follow along with in order to complete the assignment. Our course creator said that this should take about 3 to 5 hours. But that being said, if our last worksheet took you more than 5 hours, I would suggest scheduling out more time for this one as well, just to be sure you have plenty of time to work on it. When you're finished, of course, be sure you submit it as a PDF file, not as an INDD or InDesign file. Also, I want to warn you that I was very easy on grading with the first worksheet because it was our first and we were still getting used to the class, but now my expectations will be a bit higher. Namely, please take note of how in the rubric there is a very large allocation of points for the final activity on the worksheet. And I suggest at least attempting that final activity on the worksheet, even if you're running short on time, just so you can get some points. But ideally, I really want you to take your time with that final activity because it is weighted very heavily in comparison to the rest of the worksheet. Next, our big project for the next 2 weeks is our magazine spread. For this project, you are going to imagine that you are asked by your employer, either LDS.org or BYUiScroll.org, to take an existing article and create a 3-page original layout. You will be determining the headings, taking the photos, and designing the layout. Now, let's go over some project requirements. First off, of course, your design needs to be BYU Idaho appropriate. You need to use Adobe InDesign, no Photoshop, no Illustrator, just Adobe InDesign. And your design should be 3 pages, including 1 spread. And a spread is 2 pages that are positioned side by side, which is sometimes called facing pages. I'll show you student examples so you can visualize what this looks like. For the page size, it should be 8 by 10 inches and portrait oriented. But that being said, a common page size is 8.5 by 11. So I don't take off points if you choose to do that size. You need to have a 2 or more column layout. Sometimes students who attempt a 3-column layout find that it is a bit tricky. It does have a tendency to look cluttered visually for many students, but you are welcome to try it out. And you are going to design this layout around a 600-word article of your choice, which you need to find on LDS.org or BYUiScroll.org. This article can have a title, of course, but it shouldn't have any other headings that break it up. Now with this, I suggest picking a long article so you have plenty of text to play around with. And a main reason for that is you don't have to fit all of the article onto your 3 pages that you design. If your article is too long to fit, then at the very end of your design, you will just say continued on page whatever. You can choose the page number. It could be 2, 4, 44, whatever you want. And you're going to put that at the end of your 3rd page, just if you don't have enough room for the whole article. Sometimes when students choose articles that are just barely 600 or 650 or even 700, they don't have enough text to fill up their 3 pages, and it becomes very difficult for them to design around such a short article. That's why I suggest choosing a longer one. You're going to break up the article visually with 3 headings and/or subheadings, and you are going to choose where these go and what they say. You need to have a pull quote, which I'll show you examples of, and 2 or more relevant images shot by student this semester. We'll talk about that more in just a minute. And 1 or more word wrap, which can be words wrapping around an image or around a shape or a pull quote. I'll show you examples of those again, just so you can see what that can look like. And you need to have consistent headings and body copy, which means your headings should all be designed similarly, and your body copy should stay consistent as well. So don't switch up your body copy text halfway through. Make sure it's consistent. And with that, you also need contrasting typography. And usually this is achieved by having the headings contrast with the body copy. First up, we have this article that is called Bread, Mother of All Food, and this is found on LDS.org. Specifically, as you can see at the bottom, it was featured in the Ensign. So here we have a great example of layout design. I'll point out some things that I think are done very well. First off, on this first page, they use the rule of thirds very well in their design. You can see the top 2/3 of the page are taken up by the title and the picture. And then at the bottom, we have about 1/3 of the page for text. So it has a really nice proportion there, which I love seeing, especially with us just recently learning about the rule of thirds. We also are already establishing great contrast in typography. We have this big slab serif, a really nice cursive font, but that cursive script font is very easy to read, as you can see. It's not too thin, it's not too decorative. Sometimes script fonts can be a bit tricky to use, but this was chosen very well. And then we also have contrast in typography with our body copy, which looks lovely. We have nice consistency with the colors in the picture. They're very warm toned colors, and that's complemented by the oranges and the yellows used in the design, which are carried throughout the design and looks very beautiful all together. I really love the justified alignment that they chose to go with for this 2-column layout. It looks beautiful. And another thing this student did well was they really paid attention to their spacing, which you read about when you were reading about typography in our textbook last week. We can see that there is extra spacing between each paragraph, and visually that creates a really nice sense of order and organization. And then you also can see that after each section and before the next heading, there is an even bigger space, which again just looks very lovely. We have really wonderful pictures taken by this student. Again, they all tie in very beautifully together. The word wrap, which we have here where the picture curves and the words follow the edge. That word wrap is very easy to read because we still have that hard left edge where each line is starting. So it still has a very clean look to it. And the poll quote was very well chosen, and it stands out from the rest of the text without being difficult to read or feeling like the design is coming out of nowhere. We do have contrast in typography, again with the title, but also with our headings. Although it's not as obvious, most students do like to use typefaces from different categories for their body copy and their headings. But this student chose to use that same body copy text, which again, usually I don't love, but they did have it bold enough and in a different color to where there was still nice contrast that really just complemented each other. Now, this is not a perfect design. The attribution here by Norma King feels like it's not really aligned to anything. So that would have been nice to see maybe left aligned behind the title or maybe aligned to the right side of the colon there. That feels a bit like it's just in its own space. The page numbers and the word enzyme and the date feel like they should be aligned in line with these paragraphs rather than bumped over. In our textbook, it also talks about how you can show that paragraphs are paragraphs. And our textbook says to either have extra spacing between paragraphs or indent new paragraphs. And this student did both. So it would have been cleaner to just choose one or the other. Generally, I do think it looks cleaner to have the extra spacing between paragraphs. We also do have a widow and orphan. We have bread here on its own line and not here up on its own line. So again, just these smaller details. And because we do have that justified alignment, we do get some visual rivers of text where the spaces get a little bit large. But overall, this design is a very good example of consistency, contrast, and clean design. They never sacrifice readability in it, which is a wonderful attribute of a magazine spread. Because when you're designing a magazine, the harder it is for someone to read the magazine, the less likely they are to continue reading it. If a magazine is very hard to read and there's contrast issues, they're not going to want to put in that extra effort. So I love that about this design. Let's take a look at our second. Here's our second student example that we're going to go over together for this video. You can see a little quick overview here. So this is their 3 pages, and right here is their spread where we have the facing pages. I'll start off by talking about some things that I really like about it. So first off, again, we have a really nice use of the rule of thirds here. About the top third of this first page is the title of the article, and then the bottom 2/3 are dedicated to the text here, which would, again, is just a really nice way to add a sense of balance to the article. And then we have our 2 facing pages here. I really love their color choices on this spread specifically. Their color choices could have been better on this first page. The text for the body copy is a little hard to see. It would have been better to just have it be white because the screen is a bit difficult to read on the blue. But on the spread, that green is much easier to read when it's against the white. It has a nice contrast, so the readability is a lot better. And it also is just a bit more interesting than choosing just completely black text. Not only that, but we have really great contrast in our typography between our headings and our body copy. Here we have headings that are sans serif, contrasting with a serif body copy. Again, both of these fonts are very easy to read, but they're also a bit beyond the basic default fonts. They had to find these fonts They had to install these fonts on their computer. They didn't just pick default fonts that were loaded onto their computer. If you would like to find new fonts for your article or play around with some different fonts, I highly suggest looking at fonts.adobe.com. There's all sorts of free fonts there that you can activate, and they'll show up right up in your Adobe program. It's a great resource for this project. So I love their font choice. I love their contrasting typography. Here we have left line text, which again, very easy to read. It doesn't have quite as clean of a look as justified text, but the benefit to left line text is we don't have any of those visual rivers where sometimes the spacing can look a bit awkward in justified paragraphs. We also have a really good use of spacing between paragraphs. As you can see, our spacing is a little bit greater between paragraphs. And then before each heading, we have a little bit larger of a space, which again is just a great way to visually break up the article using white space. I love the use of white space here. We have our pull quote off to the bottom left. Usually geometric shapes can kind of throw students a bit. They can be a bit difficult to use in a professional manner, but this use of geometric shapes really ties in with the title of the article. So I think it was done very well. These two bottom mountains do feel like they probably should have lined up and been a bit more proportionate, but overall I really like where the student's going with it. They tie in the heading font just to keep things consistent. And I overall just really like how clean and professional this design is. I think this also is a design that shows you that you don't have to do something super complex like this article, which admittedly is quite complex. You can do something really pretty simple and still have a very professional looking design. Now, again, it's not perfect. We do have these superscript numbers you can see, which of course they made sense on the online article because they were actual links to references. But because we don't have links in our spread, those probably should have been deleted. We also have this picture here, which cuts off this paragraph on the top right in a very awkward way, and it leads to a very small, short paragraph. And you can see that it's very narrow, and overall, I think they should have just either had the picture more to the right or more to the left and completely blocked off that paragraph rather than trying to just have a sliver of the paragraph. Also, we have the paragraphs on the bottom ending in different spots, so it would have been better to try and balance that out a bit more. But we do have a great example here of where it says continue on page 10. So there's a visual example if you wanted to see what that can look like in your article. And again, overall, they had a great sense of balance, contrast, hierarchy, proximity, all of those basic principles we learned about, they utilize them beautifully. So this is a great example to reference. Now, finally, as you're submitting your draft, double check the project minimum expectations. Make sure you get that checked, especially because you aren't graded for the actual quality of the design for your draft. You're really just graded on the submission and the minimum expectations. So be sure you get all of those covered. Make sure you've completed all sections of part 1 of the project report. Export both your project report and your magazine spread draft as PDFs as usual, and submit both PDFs to the assignment, please. The submission requirements are a big portion of your grade, but they're also easy points to get. And then, of course, post your magazine spread draft to VoiceThread for peer feedback. And keep in mind that just like last time we did peer feedback, you need to participate on at least 3 separate days. So if you want to go ahead and start commenting, if you see other students' work, you can start that. And as always, please feel welcome to email me at hiller@byui.edu or message me in Canvas with any questions you have.